Right. So good afternoon. Welcome to this session. I sort of just laid out what we were going to do. I said we were looking at the purpose of benchmarking. If you go way back, we can probably go way back as we are now starting the formal part of it. Um, the last week class, you'd have seen the learning outcome. We would have stopped at 1.3, the purpose of organizational learning, and today 1.4, how change can be managed, benefits, limitation, types of worker engagement, and the last part, what is meant by competence and its importance in process safety. So where we are is 1.4, but what I was saying is that I mean there are different teaching techniques that I could use to make us go faster or slower. Um, but really we do take two sessions to finish off one of these PowerPoints, right? So I didn't I was contemplating if to move a bit faster and start lesson two. But then I said perhaps we can probably do a past paper or something, right? So I'll see how it goes. Till about 2 o'clock, we'll see what happens there. I actually have a video lineup, but the internet, you know, just starting the class. In fact, the internet was given some issues. And the funny thing is, I actually came from the office about 10:30. I went to the office, forgotten some stuff yesterday. Um, but the internet is not always, 100% effective here in Trinidad, or I guess on the island anyway. But the one in the office is actually a bit faster. But when I logged on was about quarter to one, and it wasn't logging on. So, with respect to that, and as I was saying with the video, because the video now pulls, like more internet then, right? So, I did have it here. We'll see what happens around 2 o'clock. I think by 2 o'clock we should be finished with the theory, just 2:10 past 2. So decided to look at the video, do some past papers and stuff around that time. As I have you and the internet is good for now, I think I would prefer do some teaching, right? So the first one here, the purpose of benchmarking. Let me read a couple of slides. We don't have to read all because remember I wrote these PowerPoints, right? I sort of know the idea behind them. Um, I think once you get the idea, then like once you understand the concept, like we could just explain the rest of slides, right? As I mentioned, it's about four small topics today. The purpose of benchmarking, management of change, worker involvement, and worker competence, right? And the thing about them, all of them have past papers, so it's not fair then to sort of leave them out. Um, the hardcore process safety, like the real from last week class, the advanced, sort of techniques and risk assessments and stuff starts next week, right? Next week, we start looking at advanced REs and stuff like that, right? Today's class, I still feel it's kind of it's a bit on the easier going side. Again, I would have, of course, mentioned that NEBOSH, not everything in NEBOSH is hard. I tend to see this as a nice Sunday course and a level four, right? Last week we saw a couple of vacancies asking for NEBOSH process safety management here on the island anyway, Trinidad and Tobago, right? Of course, anybody from Guyana, I suppose the same would have been said because it is an industrial standard, right? Let me make a start here, right? So the purpose of benchmarking. So benchmarking, this was the question we ended with last week. So we just the slide after that, right? So benchmarking is a way of discovering what is the best performance being achieved in the process safety industry. Just think about what we're reading and it makes a lot of sense. It's called benchmarking after all, right? Benchmarking compares, one's business. Well, in this case, it's process safety we studied. So one's business, process safety, management, and performance matrices to what the industry is doing then for process safety, right? And best practices from other companies. But benchmarking could be with anything. I mean, I think we falsely do it sometimes. I'll talk about that in a bit. Information can then be used to identify gaps in an organization processes in order to achieve a competitive advantage. Let me read a couple more. The use of benchmarking to evaluate various aspects of one's process safety management in relation to the best practice, in other companies. to identify how they are doing against other similar companies, to identify why the performance is as it is, to drive applicable areas in process safety for improvement, to determine the best practice in asset integrity management and time scale for maintenance of such. And that's just that latter one there is just like an example of something that could be measured in process safety, like asset integrity, right? Asset integrity is like how often then is a chemical plant doing routine maintenance, right? For those of us in Trinidad, of course, like Atlantic LNG, Proman, right? Like how often are they doing shutdowns? Two for the year, three for the year. And then if we have a plant, I'm not saying as big as Atlantic or Proman or one of the bigger gas plants on the island in Trinidad here, but maybe you have a similar plant. I have no smaller plants, right? And like are you all doing maintenance at all? And so you can measure up then if the bigger companies, of course, they would have the resources. So maybe you can do based on the manufacturer's instruction, based on your risk assessment, right? Based on your resources. So that's the purpose of benchmarking then, right? And of course, I said that latter one day, just one example. Like to be honest, I have more examples coming up on this slide, right? So let's hold on a bit, you'll see some more. So to determine the areas of improvement, such as the management of change with respect to PSM. So management of change, I mean, this is level 4, so I've never come across this before. People like, those like Dean Walks and those have been in the company a long time. This is a normal thing. But if you're new then, what a management of change is? Well, first of all, we use an acronym for it called an MOC. And what an MOC is, it is a document. It is a procedure then, right? So just in case you didn't know that, like how we say permit to work, and a permit to work is a form. Well, for the ones of us, I think this is the simplest explanation that I could give. A management of change is really a form, right? And so like if the company would have changed out a component that was not their regular component, right? So they changed out a component like a valve, um, maybe they purchase equipment. Okay, I'm thinking of something small, it doesn't be anything big, right? So maybe they purchase a chemical, but this is the first time, right? And in their policy would have had, like they're using, let's say chemical X then, right? Using chemical X. But chemical X was not available, right? This particular chemical, this degreaser was not available. So they had to use what was available, maybe in Trinidad, maybe in Guyana, right? And but it wasn't one that was on their inventory then, right? Now, because of that, they'll have to fill out what is called an MOC form because they change something, they change a supplier, right? And so the idea of this here is that we want to determine then like what the companies are doing with the MOC forms, right? So that's what the heading here is still benchmarking, but to determine the areas of improvement, such as the management of change with respect to process safety. So like and of course they have to, I mean, this is not if, right? I mean, this is they have to on the plans, on the process plans, right? MOC forms is like a normal form, like a permit to work form is a normal form, an MOC form is like a regular form as well. So again, I'm going to use the illustration. If you are in another company, maybe like a contractor company, and they want to measure up like how many MOC forms are they filling out, if that information is known, or are they using it at all, and they are, right? So if you are a subcontractor now going to work for a gas company like Atlantic LNG, Exxon, BP, Shell, right? And they are custom using the MOC forms, and maybe your company can start using it too, right? So that would be then the area for improvement, right? So the example here is not about MOC form really, it's really is about that we're still looking at benchmarking then. So so like the one before was asset management, and this one is MOC. So these are really process safety indicators then, right, of success and process safety. And if you benchmark against the bigger companies, you can have an idea of if they are doing them or Well, not if they're doing them, but they're doing them, but how much more you will need to do to kind of come up to speed as you head in here is benchmarking, right? To determine and foster an environment of continual improvement with respect to process safety culture. And like these are some others that I gave here. So I gave two before, asset integrity and MOC. These are some other things that you can measure in this subject and in this course against the other like the other companies in process safety. So the process safety culture, compliance with standards, hazard identification and risk analysis, asset integrity again, and reliability, MOC again, measures and matrices used in assessing process safety risk. Now, that that last one, as I said in in last week class, we do risk assessments and process safety, but we do advanced RAs then, right? So that latter one is saying, well, what measures are they using in process safety then, and can we do the same, right? What measures for assessing risk, right? So those who did level 3, like you'd have been familiar with the normal matrix then, the 5 by 5 matrix, right? But in process safety, remember I tell you last week, we actually covered one was called a hazard and operability studies, right? But it have more, it have about 5. And so if you know um a chemical plant, again, I'm just saying a chemical plant, but those of us in Trinidad, we actually know them. We know places like Shell and Atlantic LNG, desalcot, not really chemical, but water. Right? In latter example, there is a water desalination plant. But like they are using HAZOPs, right? I've actually done it with them, right? So they are using HAZOPs, and then if your company is going to do business with them, but you are still using the 5 by 5 matrix, well then that might not be because, or that might not be what they want then, right? They might want you to do HAZOPs as well. So again, these are like what I have here then is just examples of different types of measurement that we can measure up against in process safety management, right? And look how much I put here again now. These are not really exam questions. They're just to let you know. I mean, not everything, folks. I mean, remember, it's only 40 multiple choice question, right? So not every word could be a question. Sometimes you have to just understand the class now, right? And what we're trying to learn. And, an exam proves that you learn something, but hopefully you learn more than just what is on the exam. So I put a bunch of them here, a bunch of process safety indicators, process safety competence, right? Well, I wouldn't explain every one, but I mean, and you don't have to learn any. But like from what we saw in the vacancy last week, then, right? The companies are asking for NEBOSH process safety management. So like if Atlantic LNG did it, which they did, if Shell did it, if Gisby did it, right? In Guyana, and you are in this field now of process technician, you're in the field of process supervisor, and it's kind of making its rounds, right? NEBOSH is kind of taking the market with process safety, right? Because I mean, how we know that? How we know that is that on a small island in the Caribbean, which is, miles away from England, they asking for process safety here. And if you check Guyana, you see it there as well, right? So then if that's the case, but then if you're in the field, then if you stayed in this field, then we should do process safety management as well, right? Process safety competency, because it seemed to be that is what, not seemed to be. We saw the ad here. We actually have it in our WhatsApp group, right? So training, performance assurance, I just really want across, right? All of these are possible benchmarks: workforce involvement, stakeholder outreach, how many process safety knowledge you have, like did you have a certificate for that? Operating procedures, safe work practices, contractor management. Contractor management could normally be demonstrated with a questionnaire. A lot of companies, they give their contractors a questionnaire to pass, to see if they pass and get a certain score then. Performance assurance, operational readiness, conduct of operations, how many emergency management, possibly drills and stuff you would have had, how many incidents are investigated, right? So it's like when you look at the industry, you would know like what's the standard then, right? Um, and I could talk about Massey, but then that doesn't mean that that is what it is for every company, right? So maybe I shouldn't, right? Auditing, how much of that for the quarter? Some companies is one in every quarter, right? Management reviews and continuous improvement. Again, um, if you're not in safety, some of these things may just go over your head, but these things are really documents then, right? Like a management review meeting is something that is done in the industries, in like in Trinidad here, right? Remember, um, I think I mentioned last week, like we have a management system in Trinidad, very similar to ISO. It's called STO. And that is a requirement, in the industries in Trinidad for now, right? Of course, we had a change of government this week here. I believe the incoming government, in fact, they have been sworn in already. So I'll say the government or the current government had mentioned that they want to review the whole store, the whole store process, right? And so I would have to say wait and see as everybody is kind of waiting and seeing, right? The current government, the newly sworn in prime minister then, right? On the campaign trail, they would have said they wanted to um collapse Stowe into OSHA, right? As some of us know, if you didn't know, Stowe was not under OSHA, which is kind of weird because Stowe is like the biggest safety thing in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Yet still it's not under the government, right? And so we'll have to wait and see, right? Stowe is under the energy chamber, right? And I think they were talks about collapsing the energy chamber into OSHA then, which I don't think is a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. And if I have a wish list, as we all have wish lists coming in with the incoming party, it would have been to make store more affordable, right? Those of us in Trinidad here. If you're in Guyana, the price of store is very expensive. It's actually more expensive than ISO. It's actually cheaper to get an ISO certificate than to get what we have on the island here called store, right? And then you might wonder, well, why should I get a store certificate? Well, store is not meant for you. It's meant for the industries, right? But they have to get it. That's like it's like a tendering requirement then. So if you're going to do business in the industrial sector in Trinidad and Tobago, you have to have that license, right? But the license became very expensive, right? I know you all know me a bit. I was actually there with the guy who brought Stu to Trinidad. That guy is no longer in Trinidad. He went back to the UK, right? So we were there. When I say we, I had other persons with me. There's another guy, Harry Das, right? And couple of Trinidadians, and we know what they were doing, but what we didn't know was how expensive it was going to be. And I think Stu has grown into a monster. The Stu process to get a Stu certificate is over 100,000 TT dollars. It's about 20 something thousand for the actual audit, but the consultants or the preparation then, because a company might not have anything, it takes about 40, 50 based on the company, $60,000, to kind of get a company prepared. No, it's good for business, it's good for people like me, right? And I mean it's good for us, but think about the company that's putting out the money. So I often thought then, like I never charge those prices, right? I mean, there are people who charge high prices. I always try to work with a company, right? But I always thought it should have had a like a guide for the pricing. Like if you start a company, if you're a small company with 3 people, 5 people, or 100 people, it should have had a guide for the pricing. But for the last decade, it never had a guide, right? It didn't matter if you were 3 people or 100 people, the price was the same, right? And so I thought that was kind of unfair. And I often, I mean, those who know me, we do the thing, based on the size of the company, but not everybody did that. And not everybody is doing that, right? So we'll wait and see. Those of us here like ISO, then we could say ISO is like a process safety indicator. But those of us in Trinidad and Tobago, STO is more popular in Trinidad and Tobago than ISO, right? So I thought about mentioning that here as a possible PSM indicator. And of course, saying because one of the elements in it is actually management review, same as ISO management review, kind of comes under, auditing. We kind of did it in the PDCA cycle, if you remember, Plan, Do, Check, Act, right? Management review that kind of fell under acting. So England will call it PDCA, the world calls it ISO, but Trinidad and Tobago call it STO. We'll have to wait and see, right? My prayer is that it tend to be, it is still good work, but it should be streamlined and as to judging the size of a company, the ability of the company to pay. Because I did companies, I am actually doing one right now, a family-based company, right? About 12 machines, 12 kind of generator machines. I mean, that's not really big if you think of it. They're huge companies and everybody's laid out on one floor, right? So we work with them. Our prices are never so high. It's low, but not everybody, like I said, base it on size of a company. Most people just charge a price anyway, especially the energy chamber. The energy chamber itself just has one fixed price and it's over 20,000 TT. All right. So the specific benefits of preparing or sorry, participating in a process safety benchmarking study includes quantifying both safety practices and management systems, identifying gaps between the current practices, systems, and industry best practice systems. And this is a past paper here, so this one finished already. The past paper here is benchmarking is used like that. But I read all the slide. I shouldn't read all that. I should have explained it a bit more. But it was because this is our first concept. I could explain it for you without the slides, as you all know. But we'll try to read the slide, and when it gets to about 2 o'clock, we'll see if we could bridge into some past papers. There's only three more simple concepts to go, right? Benchmarking is used to identify good practices across similar. We have committees, B, organizations, C, techniques, D, procedures. So benchmarking is used to identify good practices across similar. The answer will be organizations, right? You all agree to this one? Well, out there, you're quiet for today. Sunday, taking a nap, maybe. Yeah, you all agree? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agree, sir.
yeah, yeah, at the end of the day, I tell you, the questions are simple, right? Despite the work being deep, remember that's the thing with level 4, it picks up from my level 3, leaves off or left off. But the thing is, the exam is multiple choice. So even though the work is more, like you all never really learn, like the level 3 students, like we never really learn about MOCs and things like that in level 3, right? But the thing is, at the end of the day, like you don't have to write an essay then on MOCs or, outline 10 reasons to do an MOC. It's not like that, right? It's an easier exam. It's a multiple choice exam. Of course, I said to you all many times, I love courses like these. It's no stress for me. It's no stress for you. Little bit of stress, but little bit of stress is good sometimes, right? I mean, it helps you to get your certificate. All right. So let's go to the next concept. So the next one is management of change. I'll read a couple again. If we find it getting a bit boring, I would just explain it all to you. In fact, I already explained this to you, right? So management of change. To properly manage change to process, chemicals, technology, equipment, and facilities, one must define what is meant by change. In this process safety management standard, change includes all modification to equipment, procedures, raw materials, and processing conditions other than what you normally replace. So if something has come to the end of its life, like a car battery, a catalyst, whatever you all know, a piece of equipment that you purchase and then the belts need to change at the end of 6 months, that doesn't require an MOC form. Folks, you understand that? It's kind of like if something changed then beyond the time, like maybe you can go back to the belt, the whole thing of it, like a conveyor belt then, right? So you had a conveyor system running most generators, most motors have a conveyor belt. Um, they said change it out in 6 months' time, and during the 6 months, something has happened, right? In trying to source back a belt, a conveyor belt, you could not get a belt like what was purchased then, the original belt, right? So the supplier says, this is another one from another brand of machine. It will work as well, right? You took their word for it, you purchase it, the technicians, install it, and yes, it did work, right? But that then is a change, right? So going forward now, you have to put that in your documents that you have to change the supplier, and you have changed the supplier, and this belt is not working. So in that case, then that requires an MOC form to be filled out, right? Think you understand that one a bit. Now remember, this for us here, when I mean here, like that example then, I mean that example might not be, like a catastrophic failure, but then again, it might be. I mean, this conveyor could be a huge conveyor on an offshore platform, right? So that's why they need to fill out the form then. Like when they fill out the form, they will say like, we had to change supplier from Caterpillar to Lufkin, right? And what the MOC considers is like what is the hazards then? What's the hazard of the change, right? So if this new manufacturer now has a 1 year warranty before you had 6 months. So like the 1 year purchase is a better one. And like the change from Caterpillar to Lufkin, it's a better quality. So then you mightn't have the hazard. So but that still need to be recorded, right? That you change the supplier, there's an extended warranty. It seems to be a better quality, but you're still considering and what's the hazard of the change, right? Remember, if these things are not done, as I was saying, these things can lead to a catastrophe, right? So these forms are very important. So management of change covers such as changes in process technology and changes to equipment and instrumentation. So I just list a set. From the next three slides, you'll just see a set of things that could be changed. Change in process technology can result from changes in production rates, experimentation. Now, experimentation is I guess I'd have to give an example, right? Experimentation is, I guess I'll give you my example, right? It's like if you were checking flow rates from a pump, right, in the oil and gas industry, pumps sort of operate with something called a RPM, a revolution per minute, right? So you can actually check how much time then a pump like moves then, right? Revolution per minute. So that affects your flow rate then. Like what's the flow rate of the pump to fill a tank, right? This is kind of process safety, so you could use some of these examples, right? And if an just say experimentation that the technicians, the set RPMs of the pump was about, let's say, 50 revolutions per minute, right? So that's not too bad. That pump isn't running too fast, right? But based on the flow in the well, or whatever the example, I'm using my kind of oil background here, right? Based on the flow of the oil in the well, then, right? Let's say it's a well that has good oil in it, right? Good pressure oil. They could probably get that tank filled probably with 40 revolutions per minute then, right? So 40, right? And that came about from experimentation. So I have done it. As Mama told you, I didn't always do safety. I worked in the oil field a bit, and then I worked at a company that actually sold that kind of pump, right? Progressive cavity pump. And we were technicians. I was a technician. So I know that is like my example anyway, right? And so from experimentation, sometimes the technicians, right? Well, in fact, there's a word we used to call it. That was more than 20 years ago. So I may have forgotten the word. There's a word that we used to say then that would speak towards getting the best flow out of the pump then, right? Right, I remember it. If anybody in the oil field here, you probably would know it as well. We used to call it spacing, spacing the well, right? Spacing, S-P-A-C, like space, outer space, spacing the well, right? I haven't used that term in a long time, more than 20 years, right? But I suppose it's because of the example here, right? So I'll give an example of experimentation then, right? I guess in another company, if it was, I guess, catalysts or something, and they have a certain temperature then, right? Where they make certain products in the ammonia industry in Trinidad here, right? So maybe the technicians would have had an idea if the temperature range is between let's make it up a figure, right? There's about 180 to 195. Maybe there's a kind of dream figure then. There's a kind of figure around maybe 190. So then based on experimentation, but what I said, if that was done and the document says 195, but then on the experimentation, they realize they can get the same output, just less stress on the machine, but then you need to follow out an MOC form for that. Right? You think you understand it a bit? Like in short, management of change forms need to be filled out whenever you change something that wasn't just the normal way of operating. And if you know that, then you know all of these slides, right? So I'll let you read the rest, right? Equipment unavailability, new equipment and changes in operating conditions to improve yield or quantity. So I think I gave enough examples on that, right? Equipment changes include, amongst other changes in material of construction, equipment specification, piping arrangements. All of these are just examples of change, right? Experimental equipment, computer program revisions, and changes in alarms and interlock. Employers need to establish means and methods to detect both changes and mechanical changes, and the means is the MOC form, right? Temporary changes have caused a number of catastrophes over the years, and employers need to establish ways to detect temporary changes as well as those that are permanent. Temporary changes are subject to the management of change provision. In addition, the management of change form procedure are used to ensure that the equipment and procedures are returned to the original or design condition at the end of the temporary change. Proper documentation and review of these changes is invaluable in ensuring that the safety and health considerations are being incorporated into the operating procedure and the process. But as I said, remember, the MOC form will consider what's the health and safety implication of this change, right? A typical change form should include a description and purpose of the change. So why are we making the change? The technical basis of the change, all of those will be like headings on the form. Safety and health consideration, of course. Documentation of change for the operating procedure. Maintenance procedures if you bought a new piece of belt, conveyor belt, whatever. Inspection and testing, electrical classification, training and communication, pre-startup inspection, all of these things will now become part of what you look for, right? Remember, if you change the RPMs of a pump, then when you're going to start up, then that's what you're looking out for, the new RPM, right? Duration, if a temporary change, approval and authorization of this new change or new piece of equipment that you would have purchased, right? Management of change control measures, a formal documented system developed to identify required modification, the requirement for a full hazard and risk analysis exercise on implication of the change, i.e., prevent the introduction of new hazards or unknowingly increase the risk of existing hazards. So again, when you consider the hazard of your change, that should come out of it. A risk assessment should be part of that. All changes must be authorized by competent persons, and where safety critical devices are removed, sanctioned and signed off by senior management or the authorized person. All changes to process plan and or design correctly documented for process knowledge retention. Consult and inform those affected by the change, both operational and changes of key workers. Training programs implemented where necessary. Right? We can have a read of this. I think I give you enough examples. This is an example of somebody changing something, right? So I give you my pump example. I think that's good as any other change. It was just meant to be an activity where they change a particular aspect then, right? So the one I use in the pump changing the RPMs would be sufficient. This is a typical MOC form. Um, Remember, you don't have to draw one, nor do you have to remember one. Yours is a multiple choice question. In fact, there's a question coming up, they'll ask you is like, a company is considering changing out a component and, what's the best way to safeguard the workers then in terms of hazards and risk? Answer will be do an MOC form because as you saw before, the MOC form will consider the hazards and the risk, right? What should I the hazards and the risk of the proposed change or the implication of the change, right? I think that's it there for MOC. I may have an MOC question to the back here somewhere, right? But if not, I just told you that MOC will be tested. Again, like we didn't put all the participants here now. We have participants that we give to you all. Hopefully, like I said, we can look at some today, right? Um, so let's go to the other one. I think we have worker engagement. This is simple as well. Um, right. So let's do this one. Some simple concepts anyway, but again, all of them, have questions on them, right? So worker engagement. Could you just give me a minute? I want to take off the AC. I told you I had the AC. It's on, or maybe I'll probably put it a bit higher, right? Just give me a minute. 'Cause the AC remote is on the end of the room. Okay, thank you for your time. Yeah, I was actually freezing inside here, right? Okay, so worker engagement. So the benefits and limitations of consultation with workers and contractors. Employers have a duty to consult with the employees and contractors. There are lots of laws for that in the UK. You really don't have to remember any, right? Those of us who did the certificate, some of these may be familiar. I just read them out, right? We have the safety representative and safety committee regulations, the Health and Safety Consultation with Employer Regulation 1996, the Health and Safety at Work Act, some section, section 2, section 3, construction design and management regulation, right? So the point is here, um, and it's not the best point, but the point of this slide is worker consultation is a legal requirement. That might not be the best answer because remember, the trick with NEBOSH is that just give you four correct answers sometimes. So as I said, legal consulting with your workers then is a requirement of the law, but that's not the best reason to consult with your workers, right? If you're having trouble understanding that, what they say in developed countries then, right, is that the law is the least you could do. Like say the law say consult with the workers, that's actually the least you could do, right? And so I'm just thinking about if they ask you, because there's multiple choice, and like what's the best reason to consult with your workers? It will not be the law because the law is the least you can do, right? Let's see if we could move a bit fast with this one too, right? So here we have so benefits of consultation, increase productivity. I don't think that's the best reason either, right? Improve in overall efficiency and quality. That's good. Higher level of workforce motivation. That is good. A healthier and safer workplace. Your employers can help you identify hazards, assess risk, and develop ways to control or remove the risk. That may be a better answer, right? I mean, on a production standpoint, you would say the first point is the best answer. But um, I think the best reason for consulting with your workers is getting them involved, right? Maybe that sense of motivation, but we'll have to see a question. By the way, there's one on the slide, so let me not try to overshoot it. I was just trying to suggest then that knowing this exam, they'll probably give you four correct answers and ask, so what's the best reason for worker involvement or worker participation or worker engagement? And it might not be the law. It probably wouldn't be productivity either, but it may be something to do with building up the safety culture in the company, getting everybody's input, making them feel valued and stuff like that. And I think that's a bigger reason than, well, I mean, I guess productivity is money, but I guess in terms of motivating the workers, I think that may be a better answer, right? So better decision making about health and safety, just reading part of it. Benefits of consultation, a stronger commitment to implementing decisions or actions, greater cooperation and trust. Employers and employees who talk to each other and listen to each other gain a better understanding of each other's views, joint problem solving. So all of those to me are better answers than legal. We'll wait and see what the question says in a bit, right? Detailed knowledge input into all applicable process hazards. risk and associated controls, benefits of consultation, input into policy development, contribution towards a positive safety performance, workers and safety representatives' input in developing or redeveloping safe systems of work can allow for greater acceptance by the workforce. Just let me get this message, right? Hi, I'm still in a class. I'll call you back afterwards, please now. Okay, good. All right, bye. Critical, so benefits of consultation, critical in obtaining information and demonstrating an environment of positive PSM culture in accident investigation and the lessons learned, better judgments as information about likely hazards and risk in undertaking risk assessment, healthier and safer workplaces, greater cooperation and trust between employers and employees so that overall performance of the organization improves. So that's way more than four, right? All of these are correct answers, right? The benefit of worker engagement, complying with the law, increased productivity, all of these, right? But take a look at the question here. And this was the answer that they gave for it, right? They said, well, the question said, first of all, the most important benefit of worker engagement when undertaking risk assessment is A, the avoidance of conflict when risk assessments are introduced. That is correct, right? A balanced representation of workers and managers. Um, kind of correct as well. Compliance with legal requirement. We saw that as the first, and that's correct. But they said, what's the most important benefit? And the one they gave correct was this one. The one they gave correct is, let me at my date walks here. He's now coming in, right? He was on a platform. He told us detailed knowledge input regarding practical workplace hazards and risk was the best answer. So folks, once you see it, right? Learn it, right? Remember, the exam is not open book, but it's kind of familiar now because they repeat some of the questions anyway, right? So once you see it, you can learn it anyway, right? This was the answer given for the most important benefit of worker engagement. All right, limitations of consultation with employees can lead to conflict or arguments, can be time consuming. Employees and contractors can seek alternative means of getting the task done, meaning they're doing their own thing then, right? Consultation limited to process safety management and not anything that can damage the employer's reputation and image. For example, if the company is going through a case, a lawsuit or something, um, because you're consultant then, something like that may come out, somebody may ask, can I use this piece of equipment, this forklift or this hire or something, and then they say no, that has been, it has, been stopped by OSHA or something because it's in court, right? But those things then may travel through the grapevine then, right? So contractors, workers may have sensory impairment. They are protected under the Equality Act. You cannot discriminate against them. You still have to consult with them, right? Limitations of consultation with employees and contractors can result in confidential information being leaked through the grapevine, right? It happens all the time during lunchtime by the water cooler, right? After work, at the favorite beer stop. Subcontractors may require additional information as the information passed on from the main contractors to subcontractors may vary or be lost in translation. Um, so so the limitations of consultation is that people have their own agenda then. I guess if you read this, right? Varying aims and objectives between the contractor's policy and the requirement of the process plant, PSM policy development, process safety management, or process safety performance indicators may be different initially to that of the contractors, right? And so if you want like we could pick an indicator that we could use as like maybe how much inspections you do for the day, and the contractor does none, but the client wants 3 inspections done. So then that's gonna lead to maybe some kind of, like limitation then. The contractor will say, no, we have work to do. We don't really have time to do three inspections. We really have work to do, right? And so, so these are the things and limitations. When you start to consult, then you realize like the way you just do it is not the way I just do it. The way the client wants it is not the way the contractor accustomed doing it. But now they have to do it that way, which means documents have to change, which means paperwork limitations, right? That's the limitations of consultation, right? Types of consultees and their roles and responsibilities. So who to consult with? Contract employees who may be working around a shutdown or turnarounds, contractors, employee representative, trade unions, and health and safety officials. This is like OSHA then. This is like if you're new to this course again, um, in level 3, they would have mentioned that the OSHA in England is actually called the HSE. So when you see HSE officials here, like if you're new to this course, right? HSE does not mean your HSE. HSE means OSHA, right? HSE in Trinidad, right? Like we call our HSE, well, OSHA then. But in England, they don't say OSHA. If you ever wonder, like how come you never hear about OSHA in England? Right? Because they don't say OSHA across there. They don't say OSHA in Europe and stuff. They say HSE, right? So who to consult with? If you want to think of this as OSHA then, right? Or OSHA inspectors or OSHA inspectors, right? Um, with the change of government too, they may be looking to hire new people, right? Government, now once government change, they tend to change out people. So if anybody here have your NEBOSH already, they level 3, if you're looking to, OSHA does pay pretty good, right? Pretty much sure that they'll be putting out some vacancies to hire some new OSHA inspectors and stuff as well, right? Employer responsibility to contractors. When selecting a contractor, the employer must obtain and evaluate information regarding the contract's employer safety performance and program. The employer must also inform contractors of the known fire, explosion, or toxic release hazards related to the contractor's work and the process. Explain to contractors the applicable provisions of the emergency action plan. To make it short, we're just saying the employer should tell the contractors what hazards are on site, right? Watch it here. What is the potential fire, explosion, or toxic release hazards? If a contractor is coming in then, right, you need to tell them, okay, well, this is a gas plant or, this is a water plant. I mean, which I guess they will know, right? But again, maybe if we have expats coming in, maybe you have workers from another country coming in, right? And like what is the emergency procedure? Where do we go in the event of an emergency? Remember, we're talking about process safety emergencies, which is catastrophic. So what do we do if the alarm goes off, if there is some sort of leak of this gas, right? The contractors will need to know all of that as well. Employer responsibilities, the contractors develop and implement safe work practices. That's really part of it, right? Evaluate periodically the performance of the contractors in fulfilling their obligation, maintain a contract employee injury and illness log related to the contractor's work in the process area, perform a pre-startup review of new facilities for modified facilities when the modification is significant enough to require a change in the process safety information. What are the contractor's responsibilities? Ensure that if they hire subcontractors now that these people are trained, ensure that subcontractor employees are instructed in the known potential fire, explosion, or toxic release hazards related to their job. Document that each subcontract employee has received and understood the training required by the standard. We're preparing a record that contains the identity of the contract employee, the date of the training, and the means used to verify that the employee understood the training. Ensure that each contract employee follow the safety rules of their facility. This is the main contractor responsibility, including the required safe work practices required in the operating procedure section of the standards, and advise the employer of any unique hazards presented by the contract employer's work. Means of consultation, how do you talk to these, subcontractors or main contractors, safety committees, discussion groups, safety circles, departmental meetings, email and company intranet, team briefings, digital media and web-based forums like Zoom, Skype, of course, maybe a bit old now, um, Google Meets and whatever have, you, right? Toolbox talks. Worker engagement should be given highest priority by management as it is a legal requirement. Additionally, can foster an environment of positive culture, possessively culture, can result in fewer accidents as employees are on board with the PSM policy aims and objectives. Why would they be on board? Because they were part of it, right? They are the ones who actually make up the policy, in fact, right? Management should ensure that arrangements are made for the engagement. And what might this entail? And what it might entail is having them in these groups here, having the contract employee, having the contractor, having the manager, having the safety, right? All in one meeting then, right? And so team meetings, safety circles, all of those things would make it possible. I think we are on our last outcome already. Yeah, this is the last one. Remember, I told you if you came in a bit late, um, I'll kind of assess where we are. It's going to four minutes to two, right? And I was set at the top of the hour. I would have considered either three things, but I would go with the first one, right? So the first one was to look at some past paper questions, and I prefer do that. The other one was to watch a video. We could try that still, but I want to see what time it is because I kind of using up the little minutes now. And then we could have started lesson two, but we're not really meant to start lesson two today. So I prefer look at the past paper questions, right? Thinking what to do, if they just keep reading to you or just explain. Hey, what? I'll read three slides and then I'll explain and I'll come back and read some slides again, right? So I'll read three slides. I'm reading this one, this one, and I explain what this is all about. And I will come back and touch the slides a bit again, and then this one is finished, right? Remember what I did here? When you write a course, then you write it to the syllabus. But what I was saying before now, like the slides will say the same thing over and over. Like if we go back to today's class at MOC, you had plenty things with just like the benefits. What much benefits you had? Benefits, 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 right? But if you understand these are benefits of consultation, we didn't have to read all the slides, right? Limitations, all of this was limitations. You didn't have to read all of them. So the same way with competence, and like when you write a lesson, it's developed. But once you understand the developmental process of the slides and you understand what the slide was about, well, then you can skip some of the slides because the rest of slides then is meant to just develop the same concept, right? So let's see if you get it a bit. I'll read three, I'll explain, and if you want, we'll come back and read some slides, right? It's not much again for us to go. So competence. The compliance audit must be conducted by at least one person knowledgeable in the process, and a report of the findings of the audit must be developed and documented, noting deficiencies that have been corrected. The two most recent compliance reports must be kept on file. All right, we'll still read a bit, right? So what is competence then, right? So competence is a combination of practical and thinking skills, experience and knowledge. Remember, there is no, I wonder if that's still in my heart, boy. I wonder. I'm thinking if it ever had a question on that now, like to define what is competence. I can't think of one. There is a competence question here, but as I said, we have to understand where it coming from in the class now, right? It coming from one of the slides coming up. So this is still developing what is meant by process safety competence, right? Anyway, I think it's a nice definition. Competence is a combination of practical. Think about it a bit. Think about a plumber. Think about somebody you know. Think about somebody that you do, maybe somebody that you know, right? What makes you competent in it? You have practical skills, you know what you're doing, thinking, and you have experience, right? Thinking skills, experience, and knowledge. That's a good definition of competence. By the way, if you look at it, this is the health and safety executive definition for competence, right? Competence in the context of process safety is defined as a set of capabilities, skills, experience, knowledge, and the willingness to follow rules and procedures which will provide the necessary abilities to enable individuals to potentially perform certain tasks. Remember, I read the three slides, right? Process safety competence, PSC, includes skills and knowledge on human factors, issues, as for instance, avoiding conflicting goals, handling of unforeseeable events. That is really competence. That's how you know somebody competent. Like what is happening on the plant has not happened before. But this person is able to think. Remember, you go back to the definition, thinking skills, right? And they're able to resolve the matter, then they're able to bring the upset condition on the plant back to a state of normalcy, right? Situational awareness, avoiding fatigue, having a good ergonomic or the man to machine interface, right? Let me read this one for you, please. Again, I'm starting to read three, but I'll read this one and I'll stop, right? I'll explain what this is all about and where it's going. We'll come back and read one or two slides if you want. But like these are not the question. That's a telling. This is the development slides that lead to the question, right? Many incidents have happened because necessary knowledge and competence is not available at the right time in the right place. Process safety competence often also has a role in ensuring that the correct actions are taken when an incident occurs and may be critical to reducing the impact of the event and preventing escalation. Flixboro, which was the Nipro chemical plant in 1974, um, explosion due to the release of a temporary bypass. I think I mentioned this day last week. Assembly of inadequate design operated by insufficiently competent people. The question is, what were they doing on the plant, right? Health and safety executive said that in 1975. Well, I think I mentioned that here. If I didn't, I'll just say it briefly. That was around Christmas, right? And so it had some junior technicians, right? And in short, there were three tanks, like line up in a row and one, two, three. And a connecting line between the second tank had a leak. So they closed up the second tank, and what they did, they connected a pipe then, the technicians from the first tank to the third tank, right? Now, they did really say the senior people were not there because it was Christmas and the senior people left then, right? They left like to go for Christmas dinner. Well, go home. I don't think it was a Christmas dinner. It was around Christmas night and stuff like that, right? So the pipe these technicians put though, they put it at an angle and they didn't center it properly then, right? It had a slant, they put it at an angle, right? And because of that, it said it became unstable. It blew out. I remember people died in this. We read Flixborough last week. If you want to go back to this slide, you see about 20 something people died in it, right? So yeah, I mean, in a way, like if you check it, then they're not competent because remember, competent there said experience. But these were degreed people. These were technicians who had degrees and stuff like that, right? But the only thing though is that they found out that the senior technician had left for that Christmas, time, and everyone that remained on the plant was just junior technicians then, right? And so I guess experience may be a good teacher. I wouldn't say it's the greatest teacher. I know this experience is the greatest teacher. So maybe I would change my story. So like from years from now, so experience is a great teacher. I wouldn't say the greatest teacher, right? I think everybody could learn from everybody. Sometimes the older heads, they're not really willing to listen to a new method, right? So I believe everybody could learn from everybody. And yes, experience is a great teacher, right? Nothing is wrong with saying that in that sense anyway. But what happened in Flixborough happened. I am sure one of them who had sense could have said, let's put it the right way and not put it at an angle, right? But in this case here, I suppose experience may be the greatest teacher. That doesn't mean all senior people know everything then, right? I'm just trying to say that we should be open to like, new techniques, right? In this case here, it wasn't a technique, it was just an error then in how they assemble the pipe between the first and the third tank. All right, folks, let me tell you where this is going, right? Because it's getting to 2:05. So where this was going, right, is that in process safety, then what they will normally do is create what is called a training needs analysis. You all may have heard about it before, right? So all of this is telling you that what they will do is, have you know what a training needs analysis is? So a training needs analysis, what they do, they call it, in this course, they call it a PSCMS, right? Process Safety Competence Management Scheme. And if you don't know what a training needs analysis is, it looks at, well, what knowledge and skills you have and what knowledge and skills you should have. And then what they will do is schedule your training, right? So I'm just using this course as an example. If somebody is in safety and we say, okay, like we should really do process safety. So you have the NEBOSH level 3, but we see in vacancies asking for level 4. So then we say, okay, well, for the next 6 months, we're going to try to track a supplier and see who offers the NEBOSH process safety course in Trinidad or in Guyana and try to get them get the course done, right? So that's where this is going. This was heading to um filling that skills gap then, right? That could exist. That does exist. No, yes, it does exist, right? Let me tell you why I say that. You see, a training needs analysis is done every year for your workers, right? A training needs analysis is done every year for your workers. Please remember that nobody should say then that they know all. Nobody should say that they don't want to learn anything more, right? And I mean, I have been around the companies, some of us have been here too, and I have seen people willing to learn, right? Friday, I was doing a training, it's a guy there close to 60 something years in the training, right? So people are willing to learn. People are willing to learn, right? Especially, I think, in Trinidad, Guyana as well. Guyana has a hunger for education right now. They take it very seriously, right? People are willing to learn, right? But just bear in mind, what I'm saying is that a skills gap that is created every year, competence then, right? Like what you did this year, they will take that into consideration. But that doesn't mean you're not doing no training next year. Next year you're doing training too, right? So they refer to it here as a PSC MS. If you look at what I just kind of made up one here. Those of us at the book can have one in the book just like this. I kind of took the one from the book and put it here, to be honest with you. So the process supervisor, I have level of competence here, 1, 2, 3. We can probably say that that 3 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. And so these are the courses I would have had the person do then: chemical reaction, something on hazardous substances, something on process equipment, something on instrumentation, right? The specialists will have to have the greatest detail of knowledge then, right? So then they have to get these things done. So that's one example of a TNA, training needs analysis. Again, it's not as if you have to make up a TNA like what I am doing here, because how it's normally done, I mean, I do one, remember, I have a school. So I do one for my workers, right? And I have them like the lecturer then that's doing the shorter courses, I'll have him do, like probably defensive driving, maybe confined space for himself, right? Um, the girl at the office, I will have her probably do like a safety course so that she understands like what we doing then, right? But like to work at Shadrach City, you like okay, like you must have your NEBOSH certificate, right? But like I would and I have, even for my general manager, Kevin, one of my directors, Brent, I had them do IOSH managing safely, right? Because they need to understand it's a school, but it's a safety school. So if somebody calls and asks a question, like what is this, what is a hazard, or whatever have you, right? In fact, this week here, somebody called, they asked a question on the project for level 3, right? And I did not interrupt the call. I waited to hear what the girl in the office would have said, because, like that's what we asked, that they have NEBOSH to work by us too now, right? So not just any companies, we are a safety school. We offer NIBOSH, so we ask that anybody working by us have NIBOSH as well. And the person asked a simple question. The person, I think, asked something about the sixth column in the array, and she was able to answer, right? And so, like, we do that every year. We do other courses too, we do, not just safety courses, right? We do things, like, auditing and whatever have you as well, right? But I say that if I am doing that, then the companies do it too now. They look here, like, they would put like process safety fundamentals, have the operation managers, that is mandatory for him, right? Risk assessment techniques, exothermic reaction. I made this one more process safety now, right? But like I said, in my company, I do things that are safety, but also things that are kind of administrative, like administrative things as well now, right? Root cause analysis, right? So anyway, the question coming out of this, so this is the slide. This is what it came to. The slides that I didn't read, this is where it was heading. If you look there, PSEMS, 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 all of that was heading to this slide. This is the main thing today then, right? The main part, the end of the course. So what they could ask you here, look, I have a question there. Well, like what they will ask you, and what I've seen this say like a turnaround is being planned and they are taking on many workers there in many different disciplines, operation, labor, safety, etc. They want to know what system could be used to manage the competence of the workers. Now, what you may, well, it's multiple choice, right? So if I'm making this watch and get the best answer. What I've seen them saying training needs analysis, TNE. So, but you have to memorize that. Like if that's not a familiar phrase to you, TNA, you can memorize that, right? TNA wrestling. Of course, not the same thing. Um, like I've not seen them saying PSCMS though. I've not seen them saying process safety competence management scheme, even though that's the phrase used in the book, right? And in the syllabus. I've just seen them use saying TNA. Take a look at this one. Um, Based on the time, I'll read it, right? I'll read it for you, right? So workers competently perform routine tasks on a process line. A new process will shortly be introduced that requires many different skill sets. What is the best way to help when planning to fill the skills gap? Psychometric tests, but we didn't talk about that. That's not even the course. Training needs analysis, yes. An ability test, but we didn't cover that. That's not even in the course outline. An occupational personality questionnaire. We didn't cover none of that, right? That's not in the course outline. So the best answer here would be B, right? Training, of course, to the end of it could be standard training that you go through. As how I mentioned, there are some courses we put like making sure people have NEBOSH, so that's standard training. Non-standard training, if somebody has to do, like additional duties, right? Emergency training, right? All of those are different types of training that workers can go through, right? So that was the uh well, but this one here, I think the answer is here. Which of the following is considered evidence of competence? What is evidence of competence, right? But the answer is highlighted. A trainer supervisor watching the way a worker performs a task and signing off to confirm it is correct. Sign or form to confirm that a procedure was read and understood. Attendance at the toolbox talk. The answer they give is an operator undertaking a work-related task without causing harm to themselves or others. And that's the definition of competence. Again, it's a passive question, so you know what you have to do with it, right? To be familiar with it. All right. So it's 2:15. I think the best thing to do is to just look at some past papers, right? And so I have one. I had three things to do, I told you, but not three things to do. There were three options because I know I was going to finish a bit early, right? I told you I thought about showing a video, which I could do and will do as the course go along, right? We thought about starting chapter 2 but we can look at some questions, right? Now, a long and short story here is that they don't have too much of pacifiers anymore, right? Remember, since the pandemic, the course went on online, so we don't have much pacifiers. So this is actually not my pacifier, and there are many reasons for that, and I'll just make it short, right? So this is a student's paper that I was able to get back. If you wonder what happened to mine, I think I told the classes, right? I mean, it's not an excuse, but it is the truth now, right? Like the machine I had was stolen in a robbery, as well as the secondary, and all my stuff was lost. Passport, everything, money, everything, right? So all 10, 15 years of stuff was stolen. My general manager said, it's not a joke, right? But the general manager said to me, he said, it had to take a robbery for you to change your computer. Because I had the same computer for years, right? And that's one of the reasons I never changed it. I would update it and stuff, but I never changed it because I know the wealth of information in it, right? So folks, are you all listening? These highlighted answers here may not be mine, right? So when you go through them, if you disagree with them, just let me know now, right? This is something I had to go on my email and I had to check and see who did assignments for me and try to track it back, right? This robbery was last year, October, November, not too long ago, right? And so there was no way to retrieve, there's no way to retrieve 15 years of stuff stored in a machine. I tried, right? There are ways we tried, like I said, like emails and stuff. So when you look at this, don't say I did this. If you disagree with it, just tell me why, and I'll let you know if I agree or if I disagree with it anyway, right? This was a lady, I can't remember her name. I don't know if her name is on it, right? She used to work in she probably still there, but she used to work National Petroleum, right? Anyway, let's start. So the disclaimer here is not all these things are mine, and I told you why and what has happened, right? All right, so liquid is being transferred from a road tanker into a storage vessel. The failure to open a vent valve on a gas truck, right? The NP or the Exxon or the Shell trucks on them, right? A failure to open a vent valve during the transfer could result in the tanker explosion, overflow, overpressure, implosion, right? Now, it's a vent valve, so that should tell you something about air then, right? So I do agree with this one. Do you all agree with this one? That the answer here is overpressure? Yeah, we haven't done all of this, right? I just say we needed to. Anyway, there's some psychological reasons why. If you want, we could actually look for our questions and things that we did today, right? But what I'm trying to say too now, process safety not that hard. Like if you really think about it, like we haven't done this yet. That's chapter 3. But you could still guess it because you know why? Could the answer right there? Let's look at number 2, right? Folks, I'm not looking at the chatters yet. I'm trying to see if I could cover 10 questions and I have about 12 minutes to cover 10 questions, right? When I finish the 10 questions, I'll check up on the chat and see the answers you put in, right? If you want, could you just probably tell me verbally, because looking at the chat will take some time. Let me try to get 10 questions behind us, right? Rapid temperature changes. This supposed to be can cause cracking of materials. This type of failure mode is known as a creep, brittle fracture, or thermal shock, stress, corrosion, cracking. Well, if it's temperature changes, I would still go with thermal shock. I do agree. The answer is number 2, C. If you have your paper, I think we sent you this. Now, I don't know if I sent you this one. I told you it's impossible to get past papers now because it doesn't have, remember, it's a digital exam, right? So what we have is some of the years before the pandemic, and I even lose all mines, but I told you I was able to track down those students that did and hand back to us then. The most effective standard operating procedures or process plans are those developed with the involvement of. So this is like today question because this is like employee involvement, right? So the most effective standard operating procedure for process plans are those developed with the involvement of supervisors and clerical workers, maybe not. Because we talk about SOPs, right? Plant engineers and process operators, I agree to that. supervisors and plant designers, plant engineers, and clerical workers. Because it's a process safety course, I will go with B. So I will agree with you that the answer is again B, right? If it didn't have process operators, I may have gone with supervisors and plant designers. But the thing is, a plant designer wouldn't really be there in your standard operating procedure. That's like your, okay, standard operating procedures is like how you're emptying out a tank and how you're going to fill back up the tank. Like, what is the steps now? The people who designed that plant really not there anymore, right? So I don't think C is a correct answer, right? D, sorry, not D, sorry, my mistake. My mistake, my apologies. Number four, right? I'm not too sure why I said D, right? It was number four I was gonna say. All right, so number four, um, you are trying to convince your board to adopt a safety management system like STO or ISO. You heard us talk about it today, right? You are using the argument that a safety management system can help you avoid needless and preventable deaths and injuries. What type of argument this is usually known as? Well, this sounds like a question from level three. They said moral, medical, municipal, or moral, MORAL. And this is on the slide. Um, for leadership, they said there were some reasons why health and safety should have been managed, moral, legal, and financial. So the answer for four is D. So that's correct, right? Let's see if we can get this one under us quickly. You are working on a site that handles combustible dust. You have already taken a primary dust precaution to reduce the chance of a primary dust explosion. This is actually chapter 4. However, you are worried about the risk of a secondary dust explosion. What is the best way to reduce this risk? Avoid ignition sources, have explosion relief vented. Well, it's a vent, right? Explosion suppression or good housekeeping. Believe it or not, the answer is actually D. A secondary dust explosion is, well, number one secondary, meaning it had a first explosion then, right? What dust explosions are known for? There's normally a primary explosion that stirs up the dust, and a secondary explosion that happens once the dust has become airborne. But if it didn't have dust in the first place, then it wouldn't have a secondary dust explosion, right? So that's why housekeeping is the best answer for number 5, right? Look out for it in chapter 4. Like I said, we'll get that. And hopefully by that time, everybody get book something so we could follow through with the textbook, right? Number 6, the site that you work on has a series of reactors in line, one of which is found to be leaking. To keep the production going, it is decided that a bypass pipe, this is Flixboro, needs to be installed on the leaking reactor to keep the production going. What is the most important thing you should do before installing the bypass pipe? Review the implication of the proposed change. I'll just go with that because that's the correct answer and we are kind of running out of time. The rest of them actually doesn't make sense. If you're going to put on a pipeline, you don't need to check the international standard, right? You know, okay, so process safety involves a commitment towards continuous. The answer is B, improvement. They have impartiality, that's wrong, improvision, implementation. Number 7 is B. Number 8, well, look one from last week. Sorry, the answer there, otherwise I would have asked you. Anyway, I think the answer, let's see if the answer correct. All the answers seem to be correct so far, right? But this girl was a bright girl. That's why I track her paper down. I can't remember her name at all, though, right? Not at all. I try to, but I can't, right? All right. The key elements of a process safety management system follows the plan, do, check, act model. Management review aligns itself with which part of the model. What part of the model you think will be management? So do you all agree to that? Is it planning, doing, checking, acting? Acting was what? Acting was short for what from last week? Acting was short for, what do you remember? Was short for action to improve, right? So if you're talking about management review, then that is correct, right? All right, action to improve, right? No, acting was actually short for action to improve, not just action alone, right? Action to improve, right? Two more and then we'll wrap up, right? Which of the following is a leading indicator? This is the first thing next week. A leading indicator is anything that is positive or have a positive overtone. Like manufacturing defects doesn't sound positive. Design failure doesn't sound positive. Defective equipment, neither. So anyone that sounds positive, there's audit results. Last one for today. Which form of a risk assessment is appropriate when the risk is potentially intolerable? Second thing next week, right? So for higher risk, you need risk assessments that are more accurate. And the more accurate risk assessment uses numbers, right? A risk assessment that uses numbers is called a quantitative risk assessment, right? Semi-quantitative uses numbers and words. Qualitative uses words, like you say high. The risk is high, but how high is high? What do you really mean when you say high, right? Dynamic is a GSA. They don't, a dynamic risk assessment is like what you do data, like if circumstances change and like day to day, right? But quantitative risk assessment uses, I'm trying to find a rule, right? Quantitative risk assessment uses numbers, like you say 25, or you say the risk, is 25 out of 25. That is called a quantitative risk assessment, yeah. Yes, folks, Sunday classes are like that, we have to move from the office to home. But I do have it, right? Just give me a minute, I'll take a roll, right? So that's it for today. We are finished, by the way, with chapter one. Thank God for that. And remember, it's not much chapters. There is only three chapters now. Well, sorry, four. But only three more to go now, and chapter four is very short. But chapter two, next week class, I'd advise you to be here. Is there anything happening special next week? I know one of these days is Mother's Day. Um, let's check the calendar. But
Yeah, next week is month.
next week is Mother's Day. Well, I will have to still have class though, right? But I mean, it's not an official, it's an hour of your time, right? So I'll be here as much as I could, right? I'll put myself here for that. But next week is the start of chapter two, which is gonna start getting deep then into hazards and stuff like that, right? Let me mark the roll and let you all go. I told you one of the Sundays I would not be in Trinidad, but I'll still be teaching you, right? As far as I know, I would still put myself in place to log on. Once I have internet, I'll be able to log on and conduct the class. I'll let you know what Saturday it is. But I think it could be the other week Saturday if next week is Mother's Day. I think I say Saturday. It's actually a Sunday, right? A Sunday for you all. But I will still try my best to have the class now, right? Thank God for Zoom, you could log on anywhere in the world and still have the class anyway. All right. Dane walks. I actually didn't see much persons that here today, but I know Dane was here. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Hello?
okay.
They hear me?
Yeah, good, yeah, yeah. Ricky is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Yes, thanks, Dane. All right. Ricky is here as well. Yeah, Ricky is here. Tariq, I'm seeing Tariq here. Yeah, okay, good, good. Shibiki Adams in Guyana. Let me see. Right, likewise, those of us who leave, and I'll put this up tonight or tomorrow morning on YouTube, right? Shamika Benjamin, yes, she's here.
Present.
Yes. Kendon Cornwall, I did not see him. Savian is here. Ram Singh is here. Vince, I think Vince. No, okay. Well, once I heard your name, folks, you all can leave. Do enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll see you all back next week, Sunday, right? All the best, everyone. Bye.